Greetings, magical friends. Samhain season is upon us here in the desert as we enter the darker half of the year. The air is turning crisp and cool in the evenings, and I can just feel the magic in the air as the veil thins and we turn our attention to our ancestors and our loved ones who have passed on. Although Samhain is mostly observed between October 31st and November 1st, the exact true midpoint between the autumn equinox and winter solstice is roughly November 8th of this year. Samhain is an entire season to celebrate and engage with those who have moved on to the spirit realm. Today, I will be baking soul cakes, as well as bringing you along as I prepare fun treats and decorate my house for my annual Halloween party. But this year will be extra special because we will also be celebrating my 50th birthday. My actual birthday was in August, but at that time I was completely unable to deal with the idea of having a party while my precious wonder twins Zan and Jaina were crossing the Rainbow Bridge. Instead, I decided to postpone my party to my favorite time of year and just really go all out on the most witchy birthday party ever. It just seemed really fitting to combine the Witch's New Year with my own personal New Year, and I know Zan and Jaina's presence will be strong throughout this entire Samhain season. I feel their presence with me all the time. For the party, I'm incorporating candles, sigil magic, and my favorite magical herb, cinnamon, into my recipes and decorations. I will fill the evening with intentional blessings for health, love, and prosperity as I attempt to make some big changes to my small business as well as put myself online here with this YouTube channel. I've decided to make these incredibly cute little mini soul cakes filled with my magical intentions for this next trip around the sun, as well as for the health of all who attend the party. I made 2 batches, regular size cakes for my family, and mini soul cakes for the party. As always, my recipes will be in the description box below. I start with the dry ingredients such as flour, baking soda, flaxseed as a binder in place of egg because all of my recipes are vegan, salt, and sugar. I add the coconut oil and use a fork to incorporate until it's the texture of cornmeal. You want your flour to absorb the fat before you add any of the liquids. I also added mixed spice, which is similar to pumpkin pie spice, but with the addition of coriander and mace. If you would like to make your own mixed spice blend, you can add 1 tablespoon cinnamon, 2 teaspoons allspice, 2 teaspoons nutmeg, 1 teaspoon clove, 1 teaspoon ginger, 1 teaspoon coriander, and 3/4 teaspoon of mace. Once the spices were incorporated, I added raisins, cranberries, golden raisins, and then I added the oat milk and vanilla extract. Now it's time to turn it out onto the work surface and knead it just a couple of times until the dough comes together. You don't want to over-knead the dough. Pat it into a round shape and cut it into 6 pieces. Shape them into round cakes and then cut an X across the top. Before baking, I top the scones with a little bit of granulated sugar just for a little bit of extra sweetness and crunch. These cakes will bake roughly 12 to 14 minutes. For the mini soul cakes, I was able to just scoop the batter straight onto the baking tray and flatten them out a little bit before using my bench scraper to mark the X across the top. I will freeze them at this point so that I can pop them in the oven straight from frozen the day of the party. These little soul cakes only take about 8 minutes to bake. And by the way, you can do this with a lot of different baked goods such as cookie dough, soul cakes, scones, and you can have them on hand ready to bake for any unexpected guests or when you really just need one late night cookie. That way you are never more than a few minutes away from fresh baked goods. The day before the party, I baked my birthday cake, which was chocolate pumpkin flavor with cinnamon icing. I made cupcake versions of this as well. I also made chocolate cupcakes using the same recipe, but I swapped out the all-purpose flour for gluten-free flour because I do have a few gluten-free friends. For the savory dishes, I made a vegetarian chili served with white rice. I incorporated vegetables, beans, and beautiful spices, also my intentions for all of my partygoers to feel loved. I simmered for quite a while to let the flavors mingle. Once it was done, I used a stick blender to blend it up just a little bit to make it thicker and creamier. I also made a scallop potato dish with thin mandolin sliced potatoes. The mandolin is basically a torture device that every chef has cut themselves on at some point. It is a rite of passage. If you are new to it, and even if you are experienced, I do suggest that you go much slower than I did and wear cut gloves. I sautéed onions and garlic. I also made a lovely cream sauce made with cashews, nutritional yeast, onion powder, garlic powder, black pepper, salt. It just makes such a creamy sauce. This is also a wonderful sauce to use on pasta. So as I was layering sauce and potatoes, I sprinkled sautéed onion and garlic and the Italian herbs. Then I grated my vegan smoked Gouda on top. At some point, I will have recipes for these as well. Once I had filled my baking dish, I baked it for probably an hour and a half. It was a dense beast. And now we're moving on to beverages. My local store was out of apple cider, so I decided I would make my own spiced apple juice, which is kind of nice because I get to include all of my lovely intentional spices. I added orange slices, ginger, and clove, star anise, cardamom, cinnamon sticks, and then I decided I did need about twice as much apple juice. I let it simmer roughly 30 minutes on low heat, and then when it's time to serve, I will swap out all of my mulling spices for some fresh slices of apple and orange, and then cinnamon sticks for a decorative touch. And who knows, maybe a little brandy will accidentally fall into the glasses of some of the adults. You never know. In addition to the main table of foods, I used a large cutting board to make a charcuterie with many of my own vegan cheeses and lots of fruit and crackers and nuts. It just turned out beautiful. And then for the house decorations, I used a black curtain with mini fairy lights as a backdrop to cover the area that normally has my bookshelves and printer. On the table, I scattered mini pumpkins, pomegranates, and cinnamon sticks that I had previously energetically charged. I do work with cinnamon a lot in my practice, so it was important for me to incorporate this into the decor and the food. I covered the table with a ton of little flameless candles, which I just thought added such a nice magic touch. And then I basically got my box of Halloween decorations out and just placed items throughout the house. My son helped with all of the decorating, and he created 2 pumpkins to go outside the front door for guests to see when they first come over. I love watching his creative process. It's always so fun to see what he comes up with, and he always makes me laugh. In lieu of blowing out my candles to make a wish, I carved sigils onto spell candles and used them as the birthday candles on my cake. I created the candles by carving with the spike left over from a broken corn on the cob holder. I'm not sure why, but this tool has become my go-to for carving into candles. I dressed the candles with specific oils and filled the carved areas with cinnamon. I made 3 of these spell candles so that I could keep the cake lit throughout the night. And that also gave me 3 intentions to work with. I also incorporated some of my sigil magic using shrinky-dink material. This is something that I do quite often. Whenever I have a particularly meaningful event coming up, I like to create a special sigil to wear like a talisman. To make the sigil, I use the tried and true method of stating my intention, crossing off all of the vowels and repeated letters, and then using the remaining letters to design the sigil. There are so many ways to create sigils, but this method is simple and I find it very effective. So I trace my design onto the shrinky-dink sheets and I cut them out and bake them. They come out very small and fairly unbreakable. And when it's time for the event to happen, I keep this little talisman on me, usually in a purse or a pocket, or sometimes even my bra, or you could even wear these as a charm or jewelry if you were to poke a hole into the shrinky-dink material before you bake. I keep them on me for the duration of the event for the positive outcome I want to see happen. And then once I've activated my sigil, I find that these are potent for just a short amount of time, usually just the single day. After the sigil has worked its magic, I keep these as little tokens of the special event. If need be, these can be reactivated and used again. For example, if you have a spell for a peaceful holiday spent with your typically difficult family members, you can just reactivate the sigil and bring it with you to your next family gathering. With all of the decorating and planning and baking done, it was finally time for the party. I dressed as Morticia Adams this year, and to my surprise, we had 2 more Morticias and a Gomez Adams show up all completely unplanned, which was completely awesome. Gomez and his harem of Morticias, I love it. The decorations looked wonderful in the low light, and my food table looked so magical. The food was mostly all gone by the end of the evening, except I ended up making way too many cupcakes, but my neighbors were thrilled to receive them the next day. It was a beautiful evening full of friends, laughter, food, and magic, and now I can say that I finally feel like I've had my birthday. And I have to say, I'm feeling pretty good about being 50, although it still seems kind of strange when I say it out loud. But I feel that I've earned my 50. I've done a lot of interesting things over the years, and I'm looking forward to this new year with new opportunities and new adventures. I thank you all for sharing this day with me, and hope you'll join me next time as we cook up some new magic together. Here's to amazing times ahead. Love and spices, the Desert Kitchen Witch.